The German Shepherd had never known kindness. His world had always been filled with loud voices, rough hands, and days when hunger made his ribs show through his thin fur. He was not old, but his body looked tired, and his eyes seemed much older than his years. Every time he heard footsteps, he flinched as if preparing for pain. Every time someone raised a hand, he crouched down, expecting to be hit. His life had been built on fear, and fear had turned him into a shadow of the proud, strong animal he was meant to be. When he was finally rescued, he was taken to a shelter that cared for dogs who had been abandoned or mistreated. The workers there tried to give him comfort. They brought him food, they placed a soft blanket in his kennel, and they even whispered gentle words to him. But the dog did not believe them. He would hide in the corner of the cage, pressing his body against the cold wall, his ears flat, his tail tucked tightly under him. His whole body shook whenever someone came close. To him, a hand meant danger, and a voice meant trouble. The shelter was full of dogs of all kinds, big and small, loud and quiet, playful and shy. Many of them barked happily when visitors walked by, hoping to be noticed, hoping to be chosen. Some wagged their tails, some jumped excitedly, and some pressed their noses through the bars, desperate for a loving touch. But the German Shepherd did none of these things. He sat silently in the shadows, his golden brown eyes filled with fear. He did not bark, he did not wag his tail. He seemed invisible, like a dog who had already given up hope. Visitors who came to the shelter often glanced at him, but only for a second. Then they quickly moved on. "Too big," they whispered. "Too scary." Some thought he looked dangerous because of his size and his piercing eyes. Others thought he was too broken to ever be a good pet. They wanted happy dogs, friendly dogs, dogs that ran up to them with wagging tails. No one wanted a dog who shook with fear and turned his face away when they tried to look at him. The shelter workers felt sorry for him. They gave him the name Max, hoping that a strong name might somehow help him believe he was strong inside. But even when they called Max "Come Boy," he did not move. If someone opened the cage and stepped inside, he would press himself tighter against the wall, making himself as small as possible. He was not aggressive. He never snapped or growled. He was simply terrified. It was as though he believed that the safest way to survive was to disappear. The staff often wondered about his past. Where had he come from? Who had hurt him? They knew only a small part of his story. He had been found wandering in a deserted lot, thin and weak, his fur dirty and tangled. Someone had called animal control, and they had picked him up and brought him to the shelter. His body carried signs of neglect, patches of fur missing, scars on his legs, and a collar that had left a deep mark around his neck. No one ever came to claim him. No one asked about him. He was just another dog tossed away by someone who did not care. Days turned into weeks, and still Max stayed hidden in his corner. The shelter workers worried that no one would adopt him. Dogs like him were often left behind, chosen last or not chosen at all. And a shelter, no matter how kind, was not a forever home. He needed someone to believe in him, someone patient enough to teach him that not all humans were cruel, but that someone had not yet walked through the door. One rainy afternoon, as the sound of drops tapped against the shelter's roof, Max curled himself into a ball on his blanket. The other dogs barked loudly at the visitors who came in, wagging their tails, begging for attention. Max only buried his nose into his paws, wishing to be unseen. He was tired of being afraid, but fear was all he knew. The thought of a hand reaching for him filled him with panic. He could not imagine that a hand could be soft or that a voice could be kind. A few people stopped by his cage that day. One man frowned and shook his head. "That one looks dangerous," he muttered before walking away. A woman bent down to look at him, but when Max trembled, she sighed. "Poor thing," she said softly, "but I don't think he can be saved." Even though her words were gentle, they still hurt. They made Max seem hopeless, as if his chance for happiness was already gone. The shelter workers wished people could see what they saw. Beneath the fear, there was still a dog with a heart that longed for love. They knew that Max was not mean. He was simply broken. They believed that with the right person he could heal. But convincing others to see that was not easy. Most visitors wanted instant joy, not a challenge. They wanted a dog who was already whole, not one who needed to be rebuilt with patience. That night, as the lights in the shelter dimmed and the barking slowly faded, Max lay awake on his blanket. He stared at the shadows on the wall, his ears twitching at every sound. Somewhere deep inside, he wished for a world he had never known, A world where footsteps brought excitement instead of fear, where hands brought comfort instead of pain. But he did not dare hope too much. Hope was dangerous. Hope could be broken just like bones and trust, and so he closed his eyes, trembling even in his sleep, waiting for another day that would look just like the one before. What Max did not know was that change was coming. The very thing he had never experienced, a gentle hand, was waiting just beyond the horizon. A little girl with a big heart was soon going to walk into the shelter, and nothing in Max's world would ever be the same again. The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the windows of the shelter. The barking of excited dogs filled the air as families arrived to look for pets. Some children ran from cage to cage, laughing and pointing, while their parents spoke with the staff about adoption rules. The shelter was always a busy place on weekends, and this day was no different. Max, the German shepherd, sat in his usual spot, tucked against the corner of his kennel. His ears twitched with every sound, but his body stayed stiff, his head lowered as though he wanted to disappear. He had seen many people come and go, but none had ever stopped for long. He had learned not to expect anything. Among the families who walked in that day was a man, a woman, and their young daughter. The girl was small, about 7 years old, with bright eyes that seemed curious about everything. While her parents spoke with the staff near the front desk, the girl wandered toward the row of kennels. She walked slowly, taking time to look at each dog, smiling when some barked or wagged their tails, but she did not rush to touch them like many children did. She just watched quietly, as if she wanted to understand each one before she got closer. When she reached Max's cage, she stopped. Something about the silent dog in the shadows caught her attention. He did not move toward her, nor did he bark like the others. He simply stayed curled in the corner, his eyes lowered, his body trembling. Most people would have thought he was unfriendly. But the little girl tilted her head and whispered softly, "Why are you so scared?" Max lifted his eyes for only a moment, then quickly lowered them again. He was used to people walking away, and he waited for this girl to do the same, but she didn't move. She crouched down in front of the cage and rested her small hands on the bars, her face close enough for him to see her gentle smile. The shelter worker noticed her and walked over quickly. "Sweetie," she said kindly, "you don't want to get too close to that one. He's very shy and nervous. We're not sure what he's been through." The girl looked up at the worker with wide eyes. "He's not mean," she said with certainty. "He's just scared." The worker was surprised by the girl's words. Most children wanted playful dogs that jumped and licked their hands. This little girl seemed to see something deeper in Max. She tried to explain carefully. "You might be right, but he needs a lot of patience. It takes time to help a dog like this trust again." The girl nodded slowly, then turned back to Max. "That's okay," she whispered. "I have time." Max heard her voice, soft and calm, unlike any voice he had ever known. It didn't sound sharp or angry. It sounded safe. He peeked at her from the corner of his eye. Her small fingers tapped lightly on the floor, but she didn't push them through the bars to force him to come closer. She just sat there waiting. Her parents soon walked over, calling her name. "Come on, Lily," her mother said gently. "We're going to look at the puppies," but Lily pointed to Max. "I like this one," she said simply. Her father frowned as he looked at the large, trembling dog. "Honey, that dog looks—" "Well, he looks difficult. Maybe you'd rather choose one of the friendlier ones." Lily shook her head. "He just needs someone to love him." Her mother knelt beside her, trying to explain. "Sweetheart, this dog might be very hard to take care of. He's not like the others. He's afraid of people. He might not play with you or even let you pet him." But Lily's little face remained serious. "Then I'll wait until he's ready." The parents exchanged a glance, unsure how to answer. They didn't want to disappoint their daughter, but they also knew that adopting a dog like Max was not a simple decision. The shelter worker joined them and said softly, "This dog has been through a lot. We don't know his full story, but we do know he needs someone very patient. It's not impossible, just difficult." Lily's eyes never left Max. She could see the way his body shook, the way his head lowered as though he was ashamed. In her young heart, she felt something she couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was sadness. Maybe it was compassion, but whatever it was, she could not look away from him. She crouched again and whispered, "Hi." "Max, my name is Lily. I think you're a good boy." Max lifted his eyes again, meeting hers for a brief second. Something in her voice made him pause. It wasn't the sound of pity or fear. It was the sound of someone who believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. For the first time, he didn't look away immediately. Her parents noticed. Her father sighed softly. "She's really drawn to him," he said to his wife. Her mother nodded. "Yes, but we need to think carefully. This isn't like bringing home a playful puppy. It's going to take work." Lily's father placed a hand on her shoulder. "How about we look around a little more, sweetheart? We'll come back and check on him again." Reluctantly, Lily stood up. She didn't argue, but she turned back to Max before leaving. "I'll be back," she whispered. Max watched her go, his ears twitching. Something about her presence had been different. Usually, when people left his cage, he felt relief. They could no longer stare at him or try to touch him. But this time, when the little girl walked away, a strange feeling tugged inside his chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It was something new, something he didn't understand. The rest of the day passed as usual. Visitors came and went. Some dogs were chosen, wagging their tails as they left with new families. Max stayed in his corner, silent, watching. But every so often he remembered the little girl's eyes and her gentle voice. He didn't know why, but it made him feel slightly less alone. That night, as the shelter grew quiet, Max curled on his blanket again. The memory of the girl stayed in his mind. Her words replayed softly. "I think you're a good boy." No one had ever said that to him before. For the first time in a very long while, his eyes closed not with fear but with a faint trace of comfort. What Max did not know was that Lily had not forgotten him either. At home, she talked about him nonstop. She told her parents how he needed love, how he wasn't mean but just scared. She even drew a picture of him, showing him smiling beside her even though he had not yet smiled. Her parents listened carefully. They knew their daughter's heart was full of kindness. They also knew that sometimes children saw things adults missed. By the next morning, Lily was already asking if they could go back to the shelter. She couldn't explain it fully, but she felt deep inside that the big trembling dog was meant to be hers, and in her own way, she was determined to prove that even a broken heart could be healed with patience, trust, and love. The very next day, the shelter door opened again, and little Lily came running inside with her parents following behind. Her eyes shone with excitement, and she clutched something in her small hands. It was a tiny dog biscuit wrapped carefully in a napkin. She had begged her mother to let her bring it, saying that maybe the big dog would trust her if she gave him something good. Max was lying in his usual spot, curled tight against the corner of his kennel. The sounds of barking echoed around him, and his body shivered at every sharp noise. He hadn't expected to see the little girl again. Most people came once, looked at him with pity, and never returned. But when he lifted his head and saw her walking toward him, his ears perked ever so slightly. Lily knelt down right in front of his cage, her smile gentle and patient. "Hi, Max," she whispered. "I told you I'd come back." Max's eyes locked on her hand. He could smell the biscuit from where he sat, but fear kept him frozen. He remembered too well the times when a hand reaching toward him brought pain. Even though the smell was tempting, his paws stayed planted on the cold floor. Lily didn't push her hand into the bars. She remembered what the shelter worker had said, that he needed time. So she just placed the biscuit close to the bars and sat back a little. "It's for you," she said softly. "You don't have to if you're scared. I'll wait." The shelter worker watched from a distance, her heart caught between caution and hope. She had seen many children try to force dogs to play, tugging at cages or shouting to get their attention. But Lily was different. She was quiet, patient, and gentle. She didn't see Max as a broken animal. She saw him as someone worth waiting for. Minutes passed. The other dogs barked and whined, tails wagging as visitors passed by their cages. But Lily didn't move. She simply stayed close, humming softly as though trying to let Max know she was no threat. Finally, Max's nose twitched. The smell of the biscuit was too strong to ignore. Slowly, with small, hesitant steps, he crept forward. His head was low, his body trembling, but his eyes never left Lily's hand. When he reached the biscuit, he sniffed it carefully. Then, in one quick motion, he picked it up gently between his teeth and carried it back to the corner of his kennel. Lily's face lit up. She clapped her hands softly in joy, but she made sure not to startle him. "Good boy, Max," she whispered. "See? I told you it's safe." For the first time, Max looked at her without instantly turning his head away. There was still fear in his eyes, but there was also something else, something softer, a flicker of curiosity. Her parents, standing behind her, watched with mixed emotions. Her father whispered, "I can't believe he took it. He didn't even want to move yesterday." Her mother smiled faintly. "It's Lily. She has this way with animals. She always has." Lily turned back to her parents with a hopeful grin. "Can we take him home, please? He likes me." Her father rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Honey, this isn't just about liking. He's going to need a lot of care. You saw how scared he still is." The shelter worker stepped closer. "If you'd like, we could let you foster him. That way you can take him home and see how it goes. He needs a quiet, patient family. It won't be easy, but I think he has a chance with you." Lily's mother hesitated. What if he never learns to trust? What if he stays this way forever? But Lily answered before anyone else could. "Then I'll keep loving him until he's ready." Her words were so simple, yet so powerful that they brought a lump to her father's throat. He looked at the trembling dog in the cage, then at his determined daughter, and finally nodded. "All right, we'll foster him. But Lily, you have to promise us something. You'll help take care of him every day, no matter how long it takes." Lily's face glowed with happiness. "I promise." The paperwork took some time. The shelter staff explained everything, how Max might hide, how he might take weeks or months before he trusted anyone, and how patience was the key. Lily listened carefully, nodding at every word, though her eyes never left Max. When the cage door was finally opened, Max froze. He backed up into the corner, unsure of what was happening. The shelter worker moved slowly, speaking in calm tones as she clipped a leash gently to his collar. Max resisted at first, his legs stiff, his body shaking, but the worker kept her voice soothing. Then something surprising happened. Lily walked up beside the worker and knelt down. "It's okay, Max," she said. "You're coming with me. I'll keep you safe." Her voice seemed to soften him. Slowly, with hesitant steps, Max allowed himself to be led out of the cage. His paws touched the floor of the shelter hallway and his eyes darted everywhere. The open space, the bright lights, the new smells, it was overwhelming. But through it all, he kept glancing back at Lily as if her presence anchored him. The family walked to their car with Max moving nervously at their side. He tried to pull back a few times, his body shaking. But Lily walked close, whispering gentle words the whole way. "You're okay. I'm here. You're not alone." When they reached the car, Max hesitated again. He had never been in a vehicle that brought him to safety. In his memories, rides had always meant something bad, being left somewhere or being taken to another place of fear. His paws refused to step up. Lily climbed in first and patted the seat beside her. "Come on, Max," she said softly. "You can sit with me." It took a few long minutes, but finally, with the encouragement of her steady voice, Max climbed inside. His whole body trembled as the car started, but Lily's hand rested lightly on his back. She didn't stroke him too much, knowing he might pull away. She just let him feel her touch, soft and steady like a promise. During the drive, Max pressed himself into the corner of the seat, his eyes wide, his breathing fast. But every time he looked at Lily, he saw her smiling gently, and something inside him eased, even if only a little. When they reached the family's home, Max's new world opened before him. The house smelled warm and safe, filled with scents of food and fresh air. The backyard stretched wide with grass under the sun. But Max didn't explore. He stuck close to the wall, moving carefully, afraid of every sudden sound. Lily sat on the floor across the room, not too close, not too far. "This is your home now, Max," she said softly. "No one's going to hurt you here. You'll see." Max curled up in the corner, still trembling, but his eyes stayed on her. Deep down, though he didn't understand it yet, something had begun to change. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. For the first time, there was a spark of hope. And it had all started with a gentle hand that brought him a biscuit, and a little girl who refused to give up on him. Max's first days in the new house were not easy. He was inside a warm, safe home now, but his heart did not understand safety yet. He still trembled at the sound of footsteps. He still hid whenever someone moved too quickly. At night, instead of resting in the soft bed Lily had placed near her room, he curled into the tightest corner he could find, as though the shadows might protect him. Lily never gave up. Every morning before leaving for school, she would sit quietly on the floor a few feet away from him. She didn't rush or force him to come closer. Sometimes she brought a book and read out loud in her gentle voice. The words floated softly through the room like music. Max would lift his head, his ears twitching, listening even though he pretended not to. Her voice carried no anger, no harshness, only kindness. Her parents noticed how patient she was. "She really loves that dog," her father whispered one evening as they watched her sitting near Max. Her mother nodded. "Yes, and he's already changing. Slowly, but it's there. Do you see the way he looks at her? He trusts her more than anyone else." During the afternoons, when Lily returned home from school, she would always go to Max first. "Hi, Max," she would say softly. "I'm back." She set her bag down and sat near him. If he was too nervous to eat, she placed food closer to him and waited. If he refused to drink water while others were in the room, she left him alone until he felt safe. Every step, every moment she gave him space but also presence. Days passed and little by little Max began to change. One morning when Lily sat on the floor reading, he shifted from his corner and inched closer. Not much, only a few steps, but it was the first time he had moved toward her on his own. Lily's heart swelled with joy, but she stayed calm, pretending not to notice so he wouldn't get scared. When he settled near her feet, she whispered, "Good boy, Max, I'm proud of you." That night, she told her parents, her eyes shining. "He came closer today, all by himself." Her mother smiled. "See? He's learning to trust you." Each day brought a small miracle. Max began to wag his tail, just a tiny wag at first, almost unsure of what it meant. He started following Lily from room to room, not too close, but enough to show that he wanted to be near her. When she sat down, he sat nearby. When she laughed, his ears perked as if curious about the sound. One evening, Lily decided to try something new. She sat on the floor with a brush in her hand. She didn't reach for Max right away. Instead, she brushed her own hair with it, smiling. "See, Max? It doesn't hurt. It feels nice." Then she placed the brush on the floor, just within his reach, and waited. Max sniffed it carefully. He looked at her, unsure, but her calm smile encouraged him. Finally, after a long pause, he stepped closer. Lily picked up the brush slowly and reached out just a little, pausing so he could move away if he wanted. But Max stayed. With the lightest touch, she brushed his back once, twice, very gently. Max flinched at first, but then his eyes softened. The feeling was not rough. It was not painful. It was soothing. He let out a deep sigh, and for the first time, he relaxed under her hand. Lily's eyes filled with happy tears. "Good boy, Max," she whispered. "You're safe now." From that moment, brushing became part of their daily routine. Each time Max grew more comfortable. His fur began to shine again, and his body looked healthier. The scars on his heart, though still deep, were slowly healing. One afternoon, something remarkable happened. Lily was sitting outside in the yard, reading aloud to Max when a loud truck drove by the house. The noise startled him and he jumped up, ready to run back inside. But instead of bolting, he turned to Lily. She smiled at him, her voice steady. "It's okay, Max, it's just a truck. I'm here." For a moment, Max hesitated, his body tense. Then slowly he sat back down beside her. Trust had begun to replace fear. Her parents watched from the porch, amazed. "That little girl is working miracles," her father said, shaking his head in wonder. Her mother agreed. "I think Max is finally learning what love feels like." As the days turned into weeks, Max's transformation grew clearer. He began wagging his tail more often. He started eating without hiding. At night, instead of curling into the farthest corner, he lay down near Lily's bed, close enough to feel her presence. And once, when she reached out her hand to him in the dark, he placed his head gently on her palm and drifted into sleep. One Saturday morning, Lily decided to take him for a walk in the park. Her parents were cautious, but they agreed it might be good for him. With the leash clipped on, Max hesitated at the door. The outside world had been unkind to him before, but Lily knelt beside him and whispered, "You're with me now. Nothing bad will happen." Step by step, they walked together. Max's body stayed stiff at first, his eyes darting around nervously. But with Lily holding the leash and speaking softly, he began to calm. The sunlight warmed his fur, and the breeze carried scents of grass and flowers. For the first time, he experienced the world not as a place of fear, but as a place of wonder. Children in the park pointed to him, amazed at his size and beauty. Some asked if they could pet him, but Lily shook her head politely. "Not yet," she explained. "He's still learning." Max seemed to understand. He stayed close to her side, looking up at her with trust in his eyes. By the end of the walk, his tail wagged slowly and he walked with more confidence. Lily beamed. See, Max? You can be brave. You don't have to be scared anymore. That night, as Lily lay in bed, Max curled up at her feet. She stroked his back gently, her touch no longer frightening to him. For the first time in his life, Max closed his eyes and slept peacefully, not out of exhaustion or fear, but out of comfort and trust. Her parents peeked into the room and saw the sight. "She's changed him completely," her father whispered. Her mother smiled warmly. No, they've changed each other. Max's journey was far from over. There were still moments when loud noises made him jump, and times when sudden movements made him nervous. But the difference was clear. He no longer faced those fears alone. He had Lily, and her gentle hand had become his guide. Step by step, day by day, she was teaching him that the world could be safe, that people could be kind, and that love was real. The weeks turned into months, and Max was no longer the same terrified dog who had once hidden in the corner of his shelter cage. His fur now shone with health. His body had grown stronger, and most importantly, his heart had begun to trust. Every morning when Lily woke up, Max was already by her side, his tail thumping softly against the floor as if to say, "Good morning, I waited for you." Lily kept her promise. She fed him, brushed him, read stories to him, and gave him the patience he needed. And in return, Max gave her something priceless, his loyalty and love. He followed her everywhere, whether she was playing in the yard, doing her homework, or simply sitting quietly. He was no longer a dog that wanted to disappear. He was becoming the protector and friend that German shepherds were known to be. One sunny afternoon, Lily asked her parents if they could take Max to the park again. Her father agreed, and together they walked along the tree-lined path. This time, Max walked with his head a little higher, his tail wagging more confidently. People who passed by admired him. "What a beautiful dog," someone said. Another person smiled. "He looks so loyal." Lily felt proud. She looked up at Max and whispered, "See? They see it too now. You're special." At the park, something wonderful happened. A small boy dropped his ball near Max and stopped, unsure if it was safe to get closer. Max froze for a moment, remembering the fear he once felt toward strangers. But then he looked at Lily. Her calm smile reassured him. Slowly, Max lowered his head and nudged the ball gently back toward the boy with his nose. The boy laughed and clapped. "Thank you, doggy," he said before running off. Lily's parents exchanged amazed glances. Not long ago, Max wouldn't have dared to move near anyone. Now he was showing kindness himself. It was a small act, but it spoke volumes about how far he had come. Back at home, life became more joyful for everyone. Lily's parents often noticed the way Max stood near the door whenever Lily left for school, waiting patiently until she came back. When she returned, his tail wagged so hard it seemed his whole body wiggled with happiness. He greeted her with trust, not fear. One evening, the shelter worker who had first introduced Max to the family came to visit. She wanted to check on him as part of the fostering agreement. When she stepped inside the house and saw Max lying calmly at Lily's feet, her eyes filled with tears. "I can't believe this is the same dog," she whispered. Lily beamed with pride. "He's my best friend now. He just needed someone to love him." The worker nodded, her heart touched. "You're right. You've given him a second chance." That night, Lily's parents sat her down. "We need to talk about Max," her father said gently. Lily's face fell, worried they were going to tell her he had to go back to the shelter. But her mother smiled. "Sweetheart, we've seen how much he's changed with you, and we've seen how much you love him. We've decided Max isn't just a foster anymore. He's ours. He's part of this family now, forever." For a moment, Lily was silent, her eyes wide with shock. Then she threw her arms around Max, who wagged his tail happily as though he understood every word. "Did you hear that, Max?" she whispered into his fur. "You're home, forever." From that day on, Max truly blossomed. He no longer trembled at footsteps. He no longer hid from hands. Instead, he welcomed Lily's gentle touch, leaning into her strokes with comfort. He became her shadow, her guardian, and her loyal companion. At night, he lay at her bedside, watching over her as she slept. In the mornings, he greeted her with joyful barks that filled the house with warmth. Months later, the shelter held an adoption event at the park, inviting families who had adopted dogs to come and share their stories. Lily's family decided to attend, bringing Max along. At the event, many people recognized him as the once broken dog who had been too afraid to move. They were amazed at the transformation. "Is that really him?" someone whispered. "The German shepherd that used to hide in the corner?" "Yes, the shelter worker said proudly, pointing to Lily and Max. That's him. And that little girl is the reason he's standing tall today. Lily walked Max through the crowd, her small hand holding the leash, her head high with pride. Max walked confidently beside her, his ears alert, his eyes bright. He looked every bit like the noble dog he was meant to be. But more than that, he looked happy. At one point, Lily stopped to kneel beside him. She wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "You're not the scared dog from the shelter anymore. You're my brave boy." Max pressed his nose gently against her cheek as if to say, "And you're my gentle girl." The people watching smiled, some with tears in their eyes. They saw not just a rescued dog, but a bond between a child and an animal that had changed both of their lives. Back at home that evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of gold and pink, Lily lay on the grass in the yard. Max stretched out beside her. She looked up at the sky and said, "You know, Max, I think you were always meant to be mine. We just had to find each other." Max closed his eyes, his head resting near her hand. For the first time in his life, he wasn't waiting for danger. He wasn't preparing for pain. He was safe. He was loved. And he knew it. That night, as Lily drifted off to sleep with Max lying protectively near her bed, her parents peeked into the room. Her father whispered, "It's amazing, isn't it? A little girl's love changed everything." Her mother nodded. "Yes, and Max changed her too. She's learned patience, kindness, and the power of never giving up." In the quiet of the night, the house was filled with peace. The once terrified German shepherd had finally found his forever home, and a little girl's gentle hand had given him back his life.